I renovated my parents' house from the ground up, every room, every wall, every broken thing I could fix, and I put the deed in a trust with their names on it. On the day I drove over to surprise them with the keys, my sister's husband was standing in the driveway with a moving truck behind him. My mother was sitting on the porch steps with her hands in her lap, and my father was nowhere to be found. My sister leaned against the front door with her arms crossed, watching me park. She stopped smiling the moment I stepped out of the car. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. I'm a forensic accountant, which means I spend my working hours finding the exact place where money disappeared and proving exactly who made it disappear. I am methodical. I am precise. I do not panic under pressure, and I do not let emotion cloud my judgment. These are not personality traits I was born with. They are survival skills I built in a house where the electricity was cut off twice a year, and my parents apologized for it like it was the weather. I grew up in a 3-bedroom ranch house in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where everyone's lawn is more ambition than achievement. My father drove a delivery route for 26 years. My mother worked the front desk at a dental office until her knees gave her trouble. They were not bad parents. They were tired parents. They were parents who stretched every dollar so thin you could read through it. I did my homework by lamplight during more than one winter when the utility company had heard enough excuses. I learned to read a disconnect notice before I could read a chapter book. I learned that silence at the dinner table meant my father had already done the math in his head, and the numbers were not working out. My sister is 5 years younger than me. Her name is Brooke, and growing up, she was the one who cried loudest and longest whenever something didn't go her way. And my parents, exhausted and depleted as they always were, gave in. Not because they loved her more. I believe that now in a way I couldn't as a child. They gave in because it was easier, because one fewer problem felt like progress. Because my father was already solving 12 other problems, and Brooke was standing in the kitchen, screaming about the unfairness of a curfew. So they folded, and she learned. By the time I was in college on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs, Brooke was finishing high school in the bedroom I had vacated, running up my parents' cell phone plan and demanding a car for graduation. She got a used sedan. She wrecked it in 8 months. My parents paid the deductible. When I asked my mother if Brooke had contributed anything toward it, my mother said, "You know how your sister is. She feels things more deeply than you do." I started sending money home my sophomore year. Not much at first. $60 here when the car needed an inspection sticker. $140 there when my mother's prescription copay went up. By my junior year, I had a spreadsheet. I was 19 years old with a spreadsheet tracking money I sent to a household I no longer lived in. When I graduated and took a job at an accounting firm in Cincinnati, the transfers grew larger and more frequent. Brooke's rent, because the apartment she'd chosen was beyond what her part-time receptionist job could cover. Brooke's dental work, because she hadn't inherited my mother's employer discount. Brooke's car insurance after the second accident. Brooke's security deposit when her landlord finally had enough. My parents accepted this quietly. They thanked me in the soft, pained way of people who are ashamed of needing and grateful for receiving at the same time. They never asked. They never had to. I watched the numbers and filled the gaps because I was built that way. Because at 9 years old, I had told my father it was going to be okay while he stared at a shut-off warning, and some part of me had been trying to make good on that promise ever since. Then Brooke met Derek. Derek works in sales. What kind of sales shifts, depending on when you ask him, and how well the last thing went. He is handsome in the way of men who are aware of it, and he has the particular confidence of someone who has never been held accountable for anything long enough for it to matter. He and Brooke got married at 26 in a ceremony my parents could not afford, and I did not attend because I was not invited until 3 weeks beforehand, and the airline tickets were more than my monthly grocery budget. They called me from the reception. Brooke said she missed me. She asked if I could Venmo her for the videographer because it had gone over budget. I should have stopped then. I have thought about that moment many times since. I should have put the phone down and let the next call ring out and then changed the number. Instead, I sent the money. For the next 4 years, I sent the money. Derek's business idea, which was some kind of supplement distribution model that a different word for pyramid scheme would also describe. Brooke's sudden discovery that she wanted to go back to school for interior design, 2 semesters of which I funded before she decided the program wasn't the right fit. Derek's truck payment when he was between sales positions. Their lease when their landlord raised the rent and they decided that, rather than scale back, they would simply need more financial support to maintain the life they'd chosen. Through all of it, my parents were the intermediaries. My mother would call with the soft opening. I talked to Brooke today. She mentioned they're having a little trouble, and I would do them a math before she finished the sentence. My father never asked directly. He would describe the situation in the third person, as though he were reporting news from a distant country. Derek says the market shifted. Brooke says the timing is bad. And I would transfer the money because the alternative was watching my parents absorb it themselves, and they had nothing left to absorb it with. The house came to me like an idea I'd been having for years without knowing it. My parents had owned the ranch house for 31 years. The mortgage was paid off, which was the one clean financial fact of their lives. But the house itself was failing quietly and systematically. The roof had been patched 3 times. The furnace was 19 years old and had been held together since the Obama administration by a repairman named Gary, who charged a fair rate and kept shaking his head when he left. The master bathroom had water damage behind the walls that my father had been pretending he couldn't see since 2019. The kitchen floor had a soft spot near the sink that everyone had been stepping around for so long it had become invisible. I hired a contractor friend to do a walkthrough and give me an honest assessment. She called me afterward and said the words structural and immediate, and I wrote them down in a column next to the projected costs. And I looked at the total for a long time. $260,000. It sounds enormous until you understand what was underneath it. A new roof, proper insulation, new windows throughout, the furnace replaced and the ductwork cleaned. The master bathroom gutted and rebuilt, the kitchen floor reinforced and relaid, fresh paint, new fixtures, a back deck replaced. Every broken thing that had accumulated across 3 decades of deferred maintenance addressed. I structured it carefully. I had the house placed into a revocable living trust with my parents as the sole trustees and beneficiaries, which meant that legally the house was theirs completely and irrevocably, and that no other person had any claim or standing with respect to it. I set up a dedicated account to cover property taxes and homeowners insurance for the next 15 years. I had the locks rekeyed and kept the new keys myself until I was ready to give them to my parents. My contractor friend started work in March and finished at the end of July. I did not tell Brooke. I should be clear about that. I made a deliberate choice. I told my parents in March when construction started, and I told them not to tell Brooke. My mother looked worried. She said, "Claire, she's going to find out eventually." I said, "When she finds out, the papers will be filed and the work will be done." My father nodded like a man who understood exactly what I was protecting against and was grateful someone else was doing the protecting. They kept the secret. I don't know how. Brooke has a talent for extracting information from my mother in the same patient, circling way that water finds the low point. But they held it. I drove to Columbus on a Saturday morning in August with a key on a keychain I'd had engraved with the address and the word home. I had a pie from a bakery near my apartment, peach, my mother's favorite. I had a good thermos of coffee and the folder of trust documents in my bag and a feeling I recognized as dangerous because it was too close to joy. I turned onto my parents' street and there was a moving truck. Not a rental truck someone had borrowed for an afternoon. A full-size moving truck with the ramp extended and boxes stacked on the lawn, and 2 men I didn't recognize carrying a rolled rug toward the front door. Brooke's SUV was in the driveway. Derek's truck was parked at the curb. My mother was sitting on the porch steps with her hands folded in her lap and her face doing the thing it does when she is trying not to cry in front of other people. My father was not visible. Brooke was standing in the doorway. When she saw me pull up, something moved across her face. She pushed off the door frame and came down the steps. "Hey," she said, "you're early." I got out of the car. I left the pie on the seat. "I didn't tell you I was coming," Mom told us. She glanced at our mother, who did not look up. "We wanted to be here to help you celebrate." The moving truck was still running. I walked past her to the porch and sat next to my mother. I put my hand on hers. Her hands were cold. "They said they needed a change," she said quietly. "Derek's been having trouble with work again, and their lease is ending. And Brooke said it would only be for a little while, just to get back on their feet." She paused. "I told her I needed to talk to you first." She said there was nothing to talk about because the house is ours anyway. Derek came out the front door carrying a box of kitchen things. He set it down when he saw me and opened his arms in the wide, weaponized warmth of someone who already has what he wants and is daring you to try to take it. "There she is," he said, "the woman of the hour. I hope you're not upset. We're family." I did not answer him. I looked at my mother. "Where's Dad?" "He went to the backyard." "He didn't want to," she stopped. "He didn't want to watch them bring things in." I found my father sitting in the lawn chair by the fence, the one he has kept in the same corner of the yard for 15 years, facing the garden my mother planted in patches when the money was there for seeds. He heard me come through the gate and turned around, and the look on his face was not anger. It was something quieter and worse than anger. It was a man who had worked for 30 years to own one thing and was watching that one thing be taken from him in broad daylight by people he'd fed and housed and forgiven past the point of reason. I tried to tell her they needed to call you first, he said. Derek said the house renovation was a gift to the family. The phrase landed with the precision of something that had been practiced. Dad, I said, can you come inside in about 15 minutes? He looked at me for a moment. Something in my face must have told him something, because he nodded once and turned back to the garden. I went inside. The movers had already brought a couch into the living room and shoved my parents' furniture against the wall. 2 of Brooke's decorative mirrors were leaning against the baseboard. Derek had apparently been directing traffic from the kitchen, where he was now opening the new cabinets I had paid for, taking stock. Nice work in here, he said, without turning around. I heard you drop serious money on this. Smart investment. Property values in this neighborhood are going to go up. Brooke was in the hallway talking on her phone. She held up one finger at me. I set my bag down on the kitchen table. I removed the folder. I laid 4 documents side by side on the table. I waited. Brooke finished her call. She came into the kitchen and looked at the papers and looked at me and said, "What is this?" "The trust instrument," I said, touching the first document. "Recorded with Franklin County last month. The house is owned by the David and Patricia Family Trust. The trustees and sole lifetime beneficiaries are our parents." I paused. "Their right of occupancy is," and I am quoting from the document, "exclusive, protected, and not subject to transfer, lease, or third-party occupation without the trustees' written consent." Derek turned around from the cabinets. Brooke tilted her head. "Claire, we're not strangers, we're family." "I know who you are," I said. "We're just staying here temporarily." Mom said, "Our mother does not have the authority to authorize your occupancy," I said. "The trust does. And I am the successor trustee." Derek took a step toward the table. His voice shifted into the register he uses when he's trying to sound reasonable while being completely unreasonable. "Now wait. I think there's been a miscommunication here. Patricia, can you come in here?" My mother had followed me inside and was standing in the kitchen doorway. She said nothing. "Nobody tricked you," I said. "This is a legal document. You are welcome to have an attorney review it." Brooke's voice changed. "You did this on purpose. You set this up so you could control who comes into this house. You wanted to control Mom and Dad. I set this up so that our parents own their home without anyone being able to take it from them." I touched the second document. This is the contractor's completion record. $260,000 in improvements, paid by me, to their home. In their names. Derek crossed his arms. That money was going to benefit the whole family. We're all part of this family. The third document, I said, is a screenshot of the message Brooke sent our mother on July 19th, where she told her that once you 2 moved in, you'd be able to take over the utility bills and the maintenance, and that Mom and Dad could think of it as assisted living. My mother closed her eyes briefly. "Assisted living," I said. "Our parents are 64 and 67. Brooke made a sound that was not quite a word. I was trying to help them. "You were trying to move in rent-free to a renovated house you did not pay for." I touched the 4th document. "This is a market rate rental estimate for this property, post-renovation. Comparable units in this neighborhood are renting at $3,100 a month." The number sat in the room. Derek uncrossed his arms. "You cannot be serious right now." "I am always serious," I said. "Here is what is going to happen. The movers are going to be paid for their time, which I will do, and they are going to take everything back out to the truck. You and Brooke are going to leave. And then you are going to sit somewhere and decide whether you want to be in a relationship with our parents that is not predicated on access to their house." Brooke's face had gone through several expressions and landed on the one that has worked on our mother since childhood. Her eyes went bright. Her voice softened. "Claire, please, you don't understand how hard it's been." "I've been reading your bank statements for 4 years," I said. "I understand exactly how it's been." That landed differently. Derek moved to stand next to Brooke in the way that men like Derek move when they feel the ground shifting. Shoulder to shoulder. United front. He said, "Your parents invited us. You can't come in here and overrule them." "Our parents," I said, "did not invite you." Our mother was cornered during a phone call and said yes, because she has been saying yes to you for 9 years, and it has become a habit she hasn't found a way to break yet. I looked at my mother. "Mom, do you want them to move in?" The kitchen was very quiet. My mother looked at Brooke. She looked at Derek. She looked at her hands. And then she looked at my father, who had come through the back door while I was talking and was standing at the edge of the kitchen watching. Something passed between my parents in the way things pass between people who have been married for 38 years. A whole conversation in under 2 seconds. My mother looked up. "No," she said. Her voice was small, but it did not waver. "I don't. I should have said that when you called, and I'm sorry I didn't." Brooke turned to her. Mom, I'm sorry, my mother said again. I love you, but no. Brooke cried. It was a real cry, I think, underneath the performance of it. She sat down at the kitchen table and pressed her hands over her face and cried in the sharp, hiccuping way of someone who is genuinely surprised the script stopped working. Derek stood next to her with his hand on her shoulder, looking at the wall, his jaw working with something he'd decided not to say out loud. I gave them the room. I went and stood on the front porch with my father. He put his hand on the railing, the new railing, solid under his palm. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I thought I was supposed to be the one protecting you. Both of you. You did, I said. You taught me to show up when it matters. He looked out at the street. The moving truck was still running. I let this go on too long. With Derek. With the whole thing. He stopped. Your sister isn't a bad person, Claire. I know she isn't. She just never learned that wanting something doesn't mean you're owed it. He paused. I don't know how she unlearned that, and you never did. I didn't have a clean answer for that. I thought about the spreadsheet on my laptop with 9 years of transfers in it. I thought about the disconnect notices I'd found in a kitchen drawer when I was a child, and had gone to my room and quietly memorized the timeline for when the lights would go off, so I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I thought that maybe the difference between me and Brooke was that I had learned very early that nothing was owed to anyone, and she had learned very early that enough crying produced results. I don't know either, I said, but I think it's fixable. For her. We watched the movers come down the ramp and stand by the truck looking uncertain. I went down to talk to them. Derek and Brooke left an hour later. The movers reversed everything they'd done. My parents' furniture went back to where it had always been. The mirrors went into the truck. When Brooke came out with her last bag, she stopped next to me on the front walk. You're always going to hold this over me, she said. I don't want to hold anything, I said. I want you and Derek to build something that belongs to you. I can't want that for you harder than you want it for yourself. She looked at me for a moment. I thought she was going to say something cutting. Instead, she said in a much smaller voice, I didn't know you put that much into the house. I know you didn't. She got into the SUV. Derek reversed out of the driveway without looking at me. I watched them go and felt something I couldn't quite name. Not victory, not relief, but the complicated quiet of a thing that needed to happen having finally happened. That evening, the three of us ate dinner at my parents' kitchen table for the first time in years. My mother made pot roast because it was what she made for occasions, good and bad, and my father opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for something without ever specifying what. We didn't talk about Brooke much. We talked about the new furnace, how it ran so quietly you couldn't hear it. My mother ran her hand along the kitchen counter and said she still wasn't used to it not being cracked. My father said the back deck felt different, sturdier, like it was going to be there for a while. Before I left, I made sure the security system I'd had installed was working. I walked my father through the app on his phone twice. I put a laminated card in the kitchen drawer with the emergency contact numbers and the trust office phone number and the name of the attorney who drafted the documents. Boring armor, but armor. My mother hugged me at the door for a long time. I should have said no sooner, she said into my shoulder. To a lot of things. For a long time. You were trying to keep the peace. I was making it worse. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were dry now, steadier. I'm going to call her tomorrow. Not to apologize. To tell her I love her, and that what she did was wrong, and that she and Derek need to get their footing on their own before they can be in this house again. That's good, I said. That's the right call. Will you be okay with her being angry at you? I thought about it, honestly. I think so, I said. I think I've been so afraid of her being angry that I kept paying to make the anger go away, and all I did was teach her that anger was the right tool. My mother nodded slowly. You always were the one who saw things clearly. I drove back to Cincinnati with the empty bakery box on the passenger seat. I'd left the pie. My mother had eaten 2 slices, and my father had eaten a third, and the last piece was still on the counter when I left. The messages started that night. Brooke sent 7 texts between midnight and 2 in the morning, ranging from wounded to furious, to a brief return to wounded before settling into silence. Derek sent 1 email, long and poorly punctuated, about family loyalty and the meaning of generosity and how I would understand someday when I had children of my own. I read it once and filed it in a folder I labeled exactly what it was. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years sent me a message saying she'd heard what happened and wanted me to know she thought I'd been cold. I thanked her for sharing that. 3 days after the moving truck left, I received a forwarded email from my mother. Brooke had sent it to her, CC'd to my father, and it contained language about undue influence and estate planning irregularities and the phrase I intend to seek legal counsel. My mother had forwarded it with a 3-word message, I see it. I replied to Brooke directly. One paragraph. Professional. I noted that the trust documents had been prepared by a licensed estate attorney in the state of Ohio, filed with the county recorder, and were available for review by any attorney she retained. I noted that I had retained copies of all financial transfers made over the prior 9 years, including the amounts, dates, and purposes for which each had been made. I noted that I wished her well and that any further correspondence regarding the property should be directed to the trust attorney's office. She didn't write back. The legal thread evaporated in about 2 weeks. I had expected as much. Brooke and Derek are many things, but they are not stupid enough to sit across from a forensic accountant in a deposition room and argue about money. What I didn't expect was my nephew. Brooke has a son from a relationship before Derek. He's 14, and his name is Owen, and I have always liked him in the distanced, slightly helpless way of an aunt who sees her nephew 4 times a year and suspects he is smarter than his circumstances are giving him credit for. He texted me on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after everything. The text said, "Hey, Aunt Claire, I heard the stuff about Grandma's house. That was messed up what they did. I just wanted you to know." I sat with my phone for a moment. Then I wrote back, "Thank you for saying that. How are you doing?" He wrote back, "Okay, I guess. It's a little weird at home." "I can imagine," I typed. "You're always welcome to visit Grandma and Grandpa. They'd love to see you, whenever you want." He sent back a thumbs up and then a second message. "The house looks nice in the pictures Grandma sent. I like the new deck." I wrote, "Maybe you can see it in person sometime. I'm sure Grandma would make pancakes." He wrote, "Yeah, okay, maybe." A small thing, a thread. I held on to it. 6 weeks after the renovation was complete, I drove up to Columbus on a Sunday with no particular agenda, no emergency, no document to deliver. I knocked on the door and my mother answered in the middle of making soup, and my father was watching a game on the television that now sat on a proper stand instead of the broken console it had been balanced on for years. The house smelled like onions and the particular warmth of a furnace that works the way it's supposed to. We spent the afternoon doing very little. I helped my father hang a bird feeder off the new back deck. My mother and I sat at the kitchen table, and she walked me through what she was going to do with the window box in the spring. We ate soup for dinner and did not talk about Brooke until my mother brought her up herself, evenly, without flinching. She had called. The call had been hard. The call had been necessary. I drove home that evening in the early dark, and on impulse, I slowed down before I turned out of their street. Their front window was lit from inside. I could see the television's blue light and the shape of my father in his chair. My mother was moving in the kitchen, reaching for something on the new shelf. I sat there for a moment with the car idling and felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. I thought about the spreadsheet. 9 years of transfers. The sum was significant enough that I had stopped looking at the total because there was nothing useful to do with knowing it. I thought about what that money had actually purchased, and I thought about what the $260,000 had purchased, and the difference was not just in the numbers. One of them had built something. One of them had been consumed. I've thought a lot about where it went wrong. Whether there was an earlier moment when a smaller, firmer no would have rerouted everything. I don't know. I think some people test the door so incrementally that by the time they're standing in your living room telling your father to get out of his own chair, 100 small yeses have made the floor under them feel solid. I think the only way to stop it is to stop it. Not at the end, earlier, somewhere in the middle. At the first moment, you feel the ground softening. I didn't do that. I let the ground soften for 9 years. And then I had to do something much harder and much less kind than simply saying no earlier would have been. But the house is still standing. My parents eat dinner at their kitchen table in a house that does not leak, with a furnace that runs without apology, and a back deck that is going to be there for a very long time. My mother calls me on Thursdays. My father has started texting me pictures of the birds at the feeder, which I did not anticipate but have decided is one of the better things to have come out of this whole situation. Brooke and I have not spoken. I do not know when that will change. I think she is deciding, slowly, whether she wants to rebuild something or whether she would rather stay in the version of the story where she is the wronged party. I cannot make that decision for her. I have tried to make too many decisions for her for too long, and that is at least partially how we got here. What I know is that love is not a transfer on an app. It is not a co-signature or a deductible or a lease you absorbed so that someone else could avoid accountability. It is not covering the cost of someone else's life so thoroughly that they never have to learn that life costs anything. That is not love. That is a debt that does not teach and does not heal and does not end, and the people spending it never know what it cost you because you hid the invoice every time. I hid the invoice for 9 years. I thought I was being generous. I think I was being afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm just a woman who renovated her parents' house and made sure no one could take it from them, and who drove home on a Sunday evening and slowed down to watch the lights on inside and let herself feel, for the first time in a long time, that something she'd built was going to stay built. That is the whole point of it, to build something that holds, to give a gift that no one can undo, to walk away knowing that when the door closes behind you, the people inside are safe. If you've ever been the one who held everything together while someone else held out their hand, you already know every part of this story. You know the spreadsheet and the soft openings and the phrase, "You know how she is." You know the moment the floor softened, and you know the moment you finally stopped softening with it. And if you haven't found that moment yet, I hope this helps you find it faster than I did. A boundary isn't punishment. It's just the place where your love stops paying for someone else's unwillingness to grow up. Share this if someone in your life needs to hear it. And if you're the one who needed to hear it, I hope it finds you on a Thursday, sitting at a kitchen table that belongs to you, watching the light come in through a window you didn't have to apologize for,